Okay, I'm not going to comment, I think, for the moment on what the ambassador said. I'm just going to give you an overview of the effect that this ICC process is having at the moment in Darfur, and then Sarah will pick up with Sudan more generally. I think it's very clear by now that the government action in responding to Moreno Ocampo's arrest warrant is going to cause a humanitarian catastrophe in Darfur. There's no doubt about that. And the full immediate responsibility for that has to be with the government that decided to expel these 13 organizations, among the biggest of Sudan. And 11 of the 13, interestingly, come from the P3 countries, France, England, and the United States, most supporters of the ICC Security Council. So are we going to see further action against P3 in the future? I guess it depends on the reaction from now on and what people say from now on. But the immediate result of the expulsion of these 13 agencies, I'm sure some of you here know this much more than me, I'm not an aid worker, is that 60% of all aid will be cut off within 48 hours. Moreno Ocampo, of whom I'm quite critical, himself personally, has said on many occasions publicly that 5,000 people a month are dying in Darfur. I don't see the evidence to support that. We can talk a little bit more about the numbers later. But the figures will go from the current 150 a month in violent deaths, according to the UN, closer to Moreno Ocampo's end of the scale as a result of the government's action in expelling these 13 groups. The government has said that civilians won't be affected. It will take over the work of the expelled agencies, but it doesn't have the capacity. And the agencies to the left would struggle enormously to take over, even if they could take over the staff. The agencies have been asset stripped, so they can't rebuild again because everything is gone, their bank accounts have been taken, and they can't hand over because there's nothing to hand over. So it's an extremely complicated situation. This began on Sunday when I think 7 agencies working in 10 of the biggest camps were told at the local level that they had to withdraw for security reasons. That was almost immediately rescinded by HAC at the local level, which said, no, you don't have to withdraw, you can stay. It was already apparent that the excuse of security reasons wasn't correct because agencies were selectively named. For example, some stayed in Morning where others were pulled out. So had security been the reason, they would have all been ordered out. They weren't. They were picking and choosing of those who went. By the time the local level had said, no, you don't have to go, a number of agencies had made arrangements to leave, and they went ahead with those arrangements. And then later in Khartoum, they were ordered out. Their permissions were rescinded. Some of the results of this in Kalmar, I believe you have no agency now, 90,000 people, 50,000 medical consultations last year, 20,000 antenatal consultations, now with all aid completely withdrawn. Muhajiria, where there are, I think, 30,000 IDPs, 1,400 people hospitalized, including 200 undergoing or having undergone major surgery without any medical agency following the withdrawal of MSF France. WFP is still in place for the moment. I'm sorry if I'm repeating the Guardian article, but some of it I have to repeat. But about 80% of WFP's food, I'm told, I think it may be slightly lower, was distributed by 2 of the agencies who have been expelled, Save the Children US and CARE. So the distribution network is gone. How will that work? Will the government take it over? Even if it does, will take some time to do it. How will it perform? Difficult to say. There's bound to be a knock-on effect beyond the 13 agencies who have been expelled. For example, if you're in Dalinji and you're doing water and you're expelled, another agency which remains reliant on your water for their programs has difficulty functioning. So it's going to affect more than 13 agencies who stay. So the knock-on effect for the agencies on the field, but also I think for individuals who could be affected. I mean, the security sweep of the expelled agencies is very tough. They went to the banks with them, they went to their homes, they took lists of staff. As we know, they've closed down a couple of Sudanese organizations. How will this affect the individuals who are left behind? A major concern of mine about this whole ICC process is the expectations that were raised. And they were raised, I think, both by Moreno Ocampo and by some of the more vociferous genocidal activist groups. And for the people in the camps, I suspect, I haven't been to the camps, I would think they their perception was Bashir is indicted, our problems are over. Well, that was never going to be the case. Very, very difficult indeed to arrest Bashir for all kinds of reasons. Many people in the ICC believe that the prosecutor believes he will never be arrested. When those expectations are disappointed, and the cruelty of thinking one day that you've got an arrest warrant against the president you blame for your woes, and the next day that you don't have food, you don't have sanitation, you don't have health, your child who's in the middle of the worst meningitis epidemic since 1998 has no medical care. This is a real cruel crush, I think, for those people, and that bothers me. The expectations were too high. The ICC didn't explain itself well enough to the people on the other end, on the ground in Darfur. Another concern is if people leave the camps because aid is either missing or partial, or because of action by the government. For example, will they now try to break up Kalma, as they have on several occasions in the past? If they do, who is there to prevent that? Who is there to bear witness to it? Who is there to protect the people as they leave the camp? There are no protection mechanisms in place. A new displacement towards Chad would be fraught with all kinds of problems on the humanitarian and the security levels, and I don't think they've been addressed. A concern of mine, who is always banging on about the Arabs of Darfur and how they've been demonized and how they have been neglected and how they are the bottom of the pile as the poorest people, as pastoralists, their land desertified, their space shrunk, a lot of trouble, especially with the Zarawa, a lot of theft of their animals. They're only just beginning to be on the agenda of aid agencies. And until they are on the agenda, you're not going to pull the militias away from the government. If aid work is suddenly interrupted, development stops short, there's surely a greater incentive, especially for the northern where they get the Abala Arab to go into the hands of the government as a kind of a coping strategy or livelihood mechanism, or whatever you call it. It's a great worry of mine. And then they will be more demonized and the problem will become more acute. The political process. One of my concerns about the ICC, and I think you all know I've opposed this warrant against Bashir from the beginning. The whole issue of indicting Bashir has completely dominated everything since last July. There was a tremendous chance, I think, to move on the Arabs at the time of the revolt of the Arab militias against the government in the middle of last year, when Hemeti, the Southern Darfur Janjaweed leader, and the overall command of the border intelligence guards revolted from the government, followed by many, many of the militias in South Darfur. There was a wonderful political opportunity to go in there and endeavour to take these people away from the government. Nothing was done. Not a single government I've spoken to says that it had any dealings with these people in this period. All they were focusing on was the ICC. And more than just on the ICC, on how trying to get around the problems caused by this. First of all, Article 16, now talk of suspending the arrest warrant. It's put everybody in a mess, with minimal opportunities that anything will ever come and the Bashir will ever actually be arrested. The peace process. Ever since the Moreno Campo made the application, governments have been mobilizing their lawyers. How could they engage with a government whose head of state is a now indicted war criminal? And although the others in the government haven't been indicted, Moreno Campo said very specifically that the whole of the state apparatus is a criminal apparatus. That makes it kind of difficult for our governments to engage with that criminal apparatus. It also encourages retrenchment, I think, by the government of Sudan and the coming to the fore of the hardliners. And I think we've seen that already in the initial confusion over the agencies, and in, for example, Ali Osman on Sudan TV saying that no action would be taken against anybody at the very moment in which the expulsion orders were being handed out to the agencies. So this seems to me, and I'm not an expert on cartoon politics at all, this seems to me that hardliners have been empowered by this, and that is not helpful. Just include a little bit, a couple of reasons why I personally did not oppose going for Bashir at this moment. Not ever, not in any country, but against Bashir in this moment, I am against this. One, I've been worried by the language and the claims made by the prosecutor. His claim of ongoing genocide. He wanted, in indicting Bashir, to mention only ongoing genocide around the camp. He initially didn't want to mention the events of 2003-2004, when the vast majority of the killings took place. He wanted only to focus on the camps. I'm sorry, that is mad. There is no evidence for ongoing genocide in the camps. He claims 5,000 people dying a month. The UN figure says, I think I said 150 a month. Where do you get the other 1,400, whatever it is, 5,000 minus 150? Yes, there is an meningitis epidemic at the moment, which will be largely unattended because of the expulsion of the 13 agencies by the government of Sudan. But it is the only health epidemic. The nutrition situation in the camps, I'm told by the agencies who have been expelled, is generally good. I don't think the timing is helpful at all. A camper was asked why now, and she said because of the ongoing genocide there was an urgency. If the figure was 5,000 a month, perhaps. But I don't see the evidence for that. Elections are coming up. I don't think there was any urgency. We could have given the Sudanese a chance to try to have elections, which we hopefully would put more emphasis on making free and fair. To throw him out themselves, we've rather preempted that process. I'm not speaking with hindsight. We warned last year that this would be the effect this warrant would have, and this has had it. It was bound to be damaging. I know Nicholas Kristof, New York Times, said a couple of days ago that fears that aid agencies would be expelled were overblown. I'm wondering whether he will now correct himself. These people have got it badly wrong. Whether or not you support the indictment, they have been expelled and there will now be many problems. The government of Sudan is always looking for a pretext to throw obstacles in front of humanitarian work and stop humanitarian work. We have handed them that pretext, and they've seized it with both hands. And the risk is huge. There's 4.6 million war affected, and the humanitarian operation really was the only successful part of the international response to Darfur. It's been a very, very confused response. A little personal anecdote. I just got a message from a UN office in New York saying, congratulations, brilliant article in The Guardian this morning, opposing the indictment of Bashir. It was the UN Security Council that mandated the ICC. The response has been so confused. What we're doing with one hand, we're undoing with the other. It's not at all positive. My final point is that as a result of this, the indictment of Bashir and the criminalization, in the words of Moreno Ocampo, with the entire Sudanese apparatus, makes it incredibly difficult for the international community, whose lawyers are now fully mobilized, to engage with the government at any level, anywhere in Sudan. And Sarah can pick up by talking a little bit about the effects of the expulsions of these agencies on the rest of Sudan, because the effect isn't only in Darfur, it's much wider than that.
Thank you, Julie.